Welcome to the Timescales Interviews. I'm Greg, your host. Today we have a very special guest, none other than the extraordinary Gaelynn Lea. Hi, Miss Lee. How are you today?
Hello, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, well, thank you so much. When you said yes, I could interview you, I was so excited, and it is absolutely awesome to see you.
Oh,
Now, this interview is being conducted in California and Minnesota. Am
yeah.
I correct that you're currently located up there by the gorgeous Great Lakes?
Yes, I am. I live in Duluth when I'm not on the road, which is right on the tip of Lake Superior. It's very pretty here in the summer. In the winter, it's kind of a desolate wasteland, but
You guys get snow and ice in the winter, right?
Oh my gosh, yes. We had a record in Duluth, the most snow ever, basically, this winter. It
Wow.
was
Okay.
I don't know the exact total. I'll have to look it up, but Duluth gets it's one of the snowier cities in America, so it gets pretty cold and snowy. We get both ends of the winter
Okay.
spectrum.
We actually had record snow here too. The Sierra Nevada mountain snow cap was a record that has never been seen as far as any records go back.
Wow.
Yeah. So in
Yeah.
fact, you can still see the snow up on the Sierra Nevada mountains right now in May. So um,
Wow.
now let me ask you this: didn't you just get back from New York City?
Yes. I was there for 3 weeks in May, so I missed the end of winter in Minnesota, which was glorious. Working on a new production. I can't really talk about it yet, but I'm gonna do hopefully the songs for a musical. So a new kind of adventure, something I haven't done before, and I'm really excited.
Okay, awesome. All right. Now you say you're doing the songs for the musical. Are you composing or performing or both?
Probably composing, like writing the music and the lyrics. That's the goal, anyways. It's kind of early in the process, but the hope is that I'll be able to do both of the music and the lyrics. It's
Okay.
about every musical has about 20 songs, so it's a lot of music, but it would be pretty fun.
Oh, wow. So
Yeah.
20 songs. Yeah, boy, that's a task, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's a big project, but it's been fun. I think every time I say yes to something I haven't done before, it's like scary, but then so worthwhile because you learn so much and kind of stretch what you're used to, and so that's why I agreed. And it's got disability themes, which I think is really cool, and it's going to be a fun play. Whenever I can't wait when I get to talk about it more publicly. But
Okay.
that's where I was. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Awesome. Now, have you always known for your entire life that perhaps from a young age that you have a talent for music?
Um, I did grow up around music a lot. Like my parents are very musical, and there was a lot of singing in the house. And then in fifth grade, I took a music listening test to join orchestra, and I guess that year I was the only person that got a perfect score. So like, I knew because the teacher told me that eventually that I had a good ear, but I don't think I realized that like music was going to be the thing that like was the thing I did. You know what I mean? Until
Mhm.
later. It was always a really big part of my life, and it was something that brought me a lot of joy. And even when I started performing, in college and beyond, um, I loved it, but I never thought of it as like a career path until I won the Tiny Desk contest in 2016
Okay, and you're talking about Tiny Desk on PBS.
on NPR
Oh, I'm
Music.
sorry.
But yes,
I'm sorry. NPR.
yes.
That was a slip there. Yeah, and you had beat out over 6,000 other contestants.
Yeah, it was it was a big boost. It was not expected. I entered it kind of on a whim, and because a couple of fiddle students, I was teaching fiddle. So I was doing music for a living when I won. I had been teaching fiddle for 3 years, and that fulfilled a big part of my like desire to be around music. But I never thought about touring or traveling with music until I won the Tiny Desk. And yeah, my fiddle students told me about it, and I kind of put it off, and then I finally decided, sure, I'll enter. And when I won, it was just like a huge surprise and really jump started my music career in a way that I knew was going to be monumental, but didn't realize maybe just how much of an impact it was going to have till it was
Wow.
unfolding. Yeah.
How did you find out that you won, and how did that feel?
Well, Bob Boylan, who is the host of that show, called. Like, he set up a phone call. I didn't know it was for him and me to talk. It was just, I got an email from NPR Music about a month after I submitted for the contest, and just out of the blue one day, I hadn't heard anything from them, and all of a sudden I got this email. So I arranged a time to talk with them. I thought maybe I was a finalist. That's what I was like kind of like excited about. I was like, oh, maybe I'm in the final 50 or something. But then when he called, it was actually Bob Boylan on the other end of the line, and he told me that I won, but I couldn't talk about it for a whole week. So they didn't announce it till a week later. So it was very weird. That week felt like it took forever.
Wow. Okay. You keep finding yourself in situations where you can't talk about stuff yet, I see.
I know. It's like, no, I'm sure everybody in, like, in the entertainment world, I guess it's not that uncommon, but it was definitely a new experience for me and excruciating, basically.
Wow. Okay. So were you able to tell your close friends and family?
I could tell my parents and my husband, and then Alan Sparhawk, he's a musician from the band Low. He was actually kind of someone I was playing with a lot at the time. We had our own side project called The Murder of Crows, and they had asked me, NPR Music said, we didn't realize when we saw your video that you also play with Alan in a band. Would you like to bring him out for the end of your set on the Tiny Desk concert that you're going to record out in DC? And so I said, yeah, that'd be awesome, because he was kind of the reason I got into looping with my looping pedal, is he showed me how to do it. So he's a big part of my musical journey. So I brought Alan out so I could tell him, and then I could tell the woman who filmed it, who is my best friend, Leah Nelson. She's just a person in Minnesota. And it was funny because we filmed it on my phone, and I had a really old smartphone at the time, and the zoom is glitchy. There's a part where I zoom out, and it's like it's like kind of horrible filming, but like that's the best we could do. So she laughed because she's like, you owe me for your destiny for my videography or whatever, which was terrible. But so I got to tell her too, which was fun, because and then everybody else had to not know until the day that they
Wow.
announced it. Yeah.
Okay. Now, th- do you have any favorite bands or particular genre that you enjoy just for your own casual listening pleasure?
Yeah. I love a lot of different stuff. I love things with good lyrics. So like when I was younger, I was really into Simon and Garfunkel and Wilco and Neutral Milk Hotel and the Decemberists. Like those were my main jam. And then now, I mean, I love finding new artists on the road. Like a lot of times the bands that open for you or that you co-bill with end up being really good. And you're like, oh, so I've gotten into Ben DeLaCour, Jess Klein. I've always loved Charlie Parr from Minnesota. He plays like a blues guitar, but he writes his own music, and it's beautiful. Alan Sparhawk obviously got to know his music more the more we played together. And then now when I'm like literally just relaxing, I'm really, really into swing and big band music, and just generally Louis Armstrong and Ella Fitzgerald, and then like Celtic folk like the Tannehill Weavers and the Coreys and the chieftains and stuff. Like those are my relaxing at night musics. Not so much modern stuff. I should do more research. I feel like I sometimes live under a rock with the modern music, but I really like the old stuff.
Okay. Now, you mentioned that somewhere around fifth grade, with a teacher saying something that you have an ear for music. Were you ever surrounded by mentors, anybody that encouraged you, family or friends that said that, hey, you really have an ear for music and you need to pursue being a musician?
I think, I mean, I was so lucky that my fifth grade orchestra teacher, Mrs. Sommerfeld, the one that did the music listening test, but she was willing to take on a challenge of working with a student who plays very differently. I don't know if we haven't said this yet, but I have a disability and my arms and legs are shorter. So I actually play the violin up and down like a cello. I play it very differently than most people. And the fact that she was willing to kind of work through that with me and find a new way to play, kind of reinvent the instrument. She's not like a music therapist. She was just a random elementary school music teacher. That was pretty cool. And then I think the other most encouraging figure with music was Alan Sparhawk. Like I remember, and this was a long time later, playing a song that I had just written. I had never written a song before, and we had been playing together for maybe a month or two. And I wrote a song out of the blue, and I was so nervous. I remember showing it to him and like shaking, like just really nervous. And he said, "That's good. Let's do it tomorrow night at our show." So like dive in right head first. And so I think without his like pushing, and not in a mean way, he was so like just encouraging about it. I don't know if I would have gotten into performing my own music without that boost of like, yes, this is good. You should try it. And he gave, like, I think the first song I showed him, he's like, "That's really good. I think it could use a third verse," which is like very insightful. And I wrote the third verse, and then we performed it the next day. So like having him as a mentor was really big for me. But everyone you play with, I think, inspires you. Like I played with Alan. I had a friend named Andy Gable who we did a folk duo, and I played, violin backup and harmony, sang harmony. And he was the one that encouraged me to try taking the lead vocals sometimes. And that was really new for me, and I wasn't comfortable with it at first. And, like everybody pushes you in a way on your journey if you look back retrospectively. I think most people help you. You just don't know it at the time.
Okay, but you can see that later.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Okay.
Yep. I feel very grateful for all the people that I've had, support and encouragement from. There's a lot of them if you add it up over the years.
Okay. Now, one thing I've found that a lot of musicians have in common is that they come from a home that had music on all of the time. Is that true in your case as well?
Yeah, it's very true. My parents are really musical. My mom is the choir director at their church, and my dad and mom both owned a musical dinner theater for 20
Oh,
years. Like I grew
really?
up in this. Yeah, I forget how weird it is sometimes, but like when I was 10, my mom came home and was like, "I'm going to start a dinner theater," and my dad's like, "Okay." So he obviously was roped into it because she was doing it, and they did 3 shows a year for 20 years. So it was a really big part of our family. Yeah. So like at night, my brother and I, because we didn't have a babysitter, they would just bring us with, and we'd watch rehearsals or run around and play. And like we ushered all their shows. I did lights. I played in the band a couple times. I wrote a murder mystery once. So like I did, like it was very much a family identity. So and a lot of the shows, most of the shows were musicals. So it was a big part of my life growing
Wow.
up.
That's
Yeah.
that's pretty extravagant, actually.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like it was a small company, but it was a big, it's a big deal. Like shows are a lot of work, and so it was just like a big part of what we did. It was fun, and so like years later, I ended up doing a Broadway show, composing the music for it. And although that was completely different and like a really big experience, it was fun to be back in theater after so long. Like I hadn't been around the theater in like 10 or 20 years. So to come back was really fun because that was such a big part of childhood. And then my parents did community theater as well, but their own theater company is where I was most exposed. That's probably why I like big band music. They had a musical review of the 40s really early on in their company, and I got introduced to all this 40s music, and I just liked it a lot.
Okay. Wow, very interesting.
Yeah.
Now, with I believe the violin would be your instrument of choice, and what I'm
Yep.
wondering is, do you recall one of the first times that you ever heard a violin, and did you perhaps fall in love with the violin the first time you ever heard it?
Oh, yeah. Well, I remember
Really?
distinctly. So that same lady who did the music listening test the year before that, she brought the orchestra to our school to kind of advertise, like, "Hey, you could join orchestra next year." And I actually fell in love with the cello. That's what I tried to play at the beginning of this journey with the violin. Is I tried to play the cello, but it was just too big. I couldn't. There was too unwieldy. I couldn't do it. So we moved to the violin. But I remember just watching all the strings in unison and hearing the big sound that the orchestra made And I'm still in love with the cello, like in terms of the lower notes. I favor the lower end of the violin spectrum. So like the lower notes, partly because I just love the way the cello sounds. And my vibrato, which is kind of like the bending of the notes, I do a cello vibrato because of the way I play up and down. I think of my violin as a little cello, basically. So,
Okay.
yeah, but I do remember it because it was like a revelation. It was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing to hear all
Wow.
these strings. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Now, your singing voice, and it's been said that, the human voice is the most beautiful instrument of all. And I believe your singing voice is mezzo soprano. And have you always known your entire life that you wanted to become a singer, or did you always know in your heart that you would become a singer?
No, no.
Really?
I mean, like opposite actually. Like, I felt. I mean, I still until like maybe 5 or 6 years ago would call myself a violinist. Like, I definitely felt this like real intense connection to my violin, because I put it in so much time. I mean, like learning that instrument takes a lot of time, and it's was my passion for a really lot of years. And then getting to sing was always, it's like a roller coaster. It's like very scary, but then super fun when you're done with it. Like, it took me a long time to get comfortable singing, and I didn't like my voice when I started singing. And then somebody gave me this cool piece of like thought to like chew on, is like, like Iris Dement. Do you know who that is?
No,
She's
ma'am.
a folk singer. I mean, or someone like Bob Dylan or whatever, people with unique voices, right?
Hmm.
Like if you want to be technical about it, do they have a good voice? I don't know, but either you love it or you hate it, right? Like the guy from Neutral Milk Hotel has a very intense voice, but I personally love it. But it doesn't mean that it is like it fits the box as like good in classical standards, right? Like, and so when I started realizing that a voice doesn't have to be any one thing to be enjoyed by someone, it kind of let me like let go of the idea that my voice had to be a certain way to be like there, to have to take up space in the art world or whatever. So I ended up it's starting to kind of just embrace who I was and what my voice is. And then the fun thing is that the more you sing, your voice is essentially a muscle. It gets better. You get more control over it. It gets more and more fun to sing the more that you do it. So I've learned a lot. Like I listened to earlier recordings, and you can tell I just hadn't sung as much because I had less control over my voice. So it's been a fun journey, but I certainly did not feel like I was going to be a singer. If anything, as a kid, I thought maybe I'd do violin, but more realistically, I don't know, I was going to do like law school or something. My life is not the way I envisioned it as a little girl, but it's cool. I mean, I really enjoy what I'm doing a lot. So I
Okay.
feel grateful for that.
Wow,
Yeah.
very interesting. I've never heard of the voice referred to as a muscle. That's a really
I mean, it
interesting
kind of
way.
is. I mean, the vocal cords, I should say. It's like the more you learn how to use them, like you can actually, like, there's a song I wrote once called Bound by a Thread that I can't sing for you today because I haven't done it in a while. And in order to successfully do that song, it's so high that I have to like train my voice to
Really?
sing a few notes higher. And when I wrote it, I knew that. I was like, oh, I cannot sing this song. But I tried it lower and it didn't sound as cool. It really needs to be high. And so I just was like, well, and you just kind of gradually stretch, like when you're warming up or when you're singing, just trying to hit those higher notes. And eventually you can. It just takes a while, and you got to keep doing it to keep that tone up there. But you can do it. I mean, because I can't usually sing the notes that are in that song, but it's a fun song, and I'm glad that I was able to sing it and record it because it's really fun to do. Uh,
Okay.
yeah, but your voice can change. You can shape it if you work on it.
Okay. Now tell us about the song that just came out last month with you singing.
Oh, with Michael Stipe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was, that was very random. About a year ago, I got an email from Michael Stipe, and I didn't know who it was originally. Like I
Mhm.
had to Google the name. I was like, huh, I wonder who that is. And I was like, oh, the lead singer of REM. I know who REM is, obviously. So that was very exciting. But I recorded it in Duluth for him, and then about like he's not in a hurry to release stuff. He's basically, I mean, he's not retired, but he's like he can do things on his own time frame right now. So like a year ago I sent it to him. He's like, okay, cool. And then when I was back in New York, when I was in New York to do Macbeth about a year ago, he said, I'm actually in New York. Could you come and re-record these at a studio with me? And I got to actually have a recording session with him, which was so fun. He's a really good vocal coach. Like he just loves music and he's so positive, but he also has really good insight. So like just the like subtle notes of like how to sing something. I don't know. I just got a lot out of it, and it was just really fun to be able to record with him and see the process. And then it got released about a year later on Earth Day, this 2023, and that was exciting. But he's a very nice person, and it was just really cool to be around someone who's done so much and like get to learn from them. It's been really fun.
Okay. Now, you mentioned Macbeth on Broadway. Were you in?
Yeah.
What was your involvement in that?
I composed a score for it. So it was not like there was one singing song at the very, very, very end of the play that an actor sung, but everything else was pre-recorded instrumental score that went underneath the dialogue. And it was about an hour of music, though, so it was quite a lot of scoring. It was very music heavy. And we found this cool way to have these like ambient pads underneath in the right key, and then the sound designer would press go whenever a particular music cue I wanted to come on the right word. So it really felt like a live score. I wish I was explaining this a little better, but instead of having it be set to this blasé, like just bland landscape, I was able to have these very specific music cues line up with the words in the script, and it was really fun. So it kind of felt like a movie soundtrack more than anything, I guess. It was really fun.
Would you say the music was incidentally cued?
Yeah, it would be cued based on like, so like if someone says Macbeth doth come, on the word come, you would press go, and the cue I made for that moment would start at that exact second. So it was all kind of triggered live in the production. It was really fun.
Yeah, very interesting. Now, I'm wondering, do you have an educational background, particularly in arts or performing arts?
Nope.
Wow.
I mean, I took classical, violin all the way through high school, and then I played in a recreational like Celtic group throughout college, but nothing past high school really. I was a poli-sci major and a psychology minor in college. Okay. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, shifting gears here just a little bit. You are working on a book, correct?
Yes, I am. So it's again not announced, but I actually have a publisher lined up, which is really exciting. So it's actually going to happen, probably 2025, when it will be released. But I'm writing a memoir, and this kind of got these two tracks of like growing up with a disability, and being myself or whatever, growing up, coming of age. But then the second half of the book is about being a disabled artist on the road, because a lot of the arts infrastructure is not accessible, and disability people just don't know how to portray it, or how to think of it as a culture instead of like a medical problem. Like there's a lot of issues that disabled artists on the road kind of deal with on a daily basis, from like getting into the venue to getting up on the stage, to how to deal with interviews and stuff. So it just it's talking about that kind of stuff too. And then music, like how I write, and it's a memoir. It scans a whole bunch of different topics, but it's been really fun to start. I mean, I have the book proposal done. There's 2 chapters done, but now I got to write the rest of it, basically. So that's where I am at right now. It's about to embark on like sitting down and writing the whole thing.
Okay. Okay, very interesting. Now, I believe that you are a public speaker, and do you happen to have any favorite topics to speak of?
Yeah, I mean, my favorite thing right now, especially, I think it's really important to talk about accessibility in the arts and like how accessible is your venue, blah, blah, blah. But what I love to talk about most is disability culture, like the idea that disability is like a form of diversity that can be celebrated rather than a kind of a limitation or a lack or something that's inherently negative, and talking about the culture behind it, which is like, I make songs that are influenced by my life experience. So every song I make, at least in part, is due to being who I am as a disabled person. So there's nothing wrong with being disabled. Like it inspires and influences the work that I create. And I think if we were more willing to talk about disability, if people felt more comfortable sharing about their own experiences, or if our society wanted to listen to them more, like was more open to it, I think we would realize that a lot of art and music and plays and things that we value as a culture, a lot of ideas come from disabled people, but we don't always acknowledge that. You know what I mean? Like, disability is an important part of our culture. It's not like a tragic thing that happens. It doesn't have to be. It's like when we recognize that it creates this whole other way of looking at the world that's beneficial. Like, I think we can celebrate it as opposed to like pity it or try to avoid the topic altogether. So disability culture is something I'm very excited about speaking on.
Okay. Now you mentioned avoid the topic, and I actually did not have one single question for you today at all about a disability. But I will have you know that after I first discovered you online, I did Google and found out what brittle bone is.
Yeah.
So I do know of that. Is disability culture something that you spoke of when you were a guest speaker at Yale?
Actually, that topic was sort of it's been a journey to kind of come to this realization that disability is a culture. I remember that idea didn't really come to me until I was reading a poster. It's kind of random. I was reading a poster at a college where I was speaking, and it had this like, culture is like an iceberg where there's the tip of the iceberg. They were talking about racial diversity, I'm pretty sure this poster was specifically, but the tip of the iceberg is like the music, the art, the literature, but the bottom of the iceberg, the bigger part, the part that you don't see, is like how you relate to people, how you look at the world. And I was like, wow, disability is the same. Like, we create our art up here and we share it with the world, but it really influences everything about how we live and interact with people. Like, I mean, I need a lot more help than most people to do daily stuff, but it's just like it's not bad. It's just the way I've always lived. And I think disabled people view certain things like productivity and feeling this urge that they have to always be useful. You have to evaluate that, because they're like, wait, am I not useful if I'm not like earning a paycheck? That's not like a good way to look at humanity, right? That their worth is tied to their ability to work. There's a lot of things that disability informs that are what I think of as culture. Anyway, so at Yale, that was a TED talk that I gave about disability and sexuality. And that was a little different, but it was based on an idea that because people with disabilities haven't traditionally been marketed to for like magazines and sexuality and like fashion and all this stuff, like traditionally we've just been kind of like left. You don't see us on magazine pages. It's starting to change, actually, but when I was doing this talk, definitely I did not grow up seeing disabled people on the cover of Cosmopolitan magazine or whatever, right?
Right.
Or Vogue or anything like that. So my realization was that I was left out of this idea of traditional beauty. And in a way, that's kind of sad. Like, that's not great. But the one side benefit was that by not feeling this pressure to conform, because I knew that the goal was completely unattainable for me. Like, even if I like lost 5 pounds or wore brand name clothes, I still wasn't going to fit the mold that people were trying to like sell, right? And so I kind of just stopped caring about that stuff. And I realized that I had grown up kind of free from these standards that were imposed by other people on like beauty. And I could just embrace who I was as myself, and just kind of grew up not feeling this like judgment because I was left out of it. And which is not, I mean, there's like pros and cons, right? It's not great to be left out. But in this case, in this one instance, I realized that I was free. And then the bigger realization was that inner freedom is actually something we all are. We allow companies to tell us what to buy. We allow people in magazines to make us feel bad about ourselves. I mean, like it's hard to avoid, but if you recognize that other people's standards for you are something that you can choose to accept or reject, like you can make your own path. Everybody is actually free to do that, for the most part. Like your standards are there to keep people in line a lot of times rather than to like support their own natural growth. And so yeah, so inner freedom, I think, came from that realization that like I can just be myself and nobody's going to try to push me into this one idea of beauty. But it helps with other things. Like I think when I won the Tiny Desk, my husband and I were like, yeah, let's sell the house and start touring. And we like didn't even give it a second thought. Like people thought we were like, they were like, what are you doing? But I wasn't scared because it's like, do I need to have a 9 to 5? Like, no, like there's no, yes, it's not typical, the lifestyle. Like our decisions aren't necessarily like the typical American couple or whatever, but like we made this awesome thing together, like a life on the road, and it was really cool. And but I think I would have been more scared if I was worried what people thought. You know what I mean? So like
Yeah.
letting that go has been helpful.
Okay. That's very interesting. I think Cosmopolitan needs to contact you. Uh,
Yeah,
now,
it's like a double-edged sword. I think some people like fashion more than me. So like I like bright colors and like flowers and stuff, but I'm not a fashion girl generally. I'm like, oh, I got this dress for $12. Awesome.
there you go. Now, I guess the closest interaction I've had with a great friend with a disability is that my best friend had multiple sclerosis,
Oh yeah.
which it did not kill him. He beat it. He died of old age. But
Wow.
so his entire life, the entire time that I knew him, for almost 30 years, he was always using a wheelchair. And one of the things that I always thought was so unfair is that some of the time people would look at him and they would think that there was something wrong with his mind
I know.
and think, I
Yeah.
mean, that's just ridiculous. And they would think that he wasn't intelligent, because he was in a
Yeah.
wheel, which it was really sad for me to see that. But actually, it was not very common. It just, but he did run into that occasionally. So, um,
Yeah.
do you happen to have any secret crazy hobbies that nobody knows about?
That nobody knows about. Well, I've outed myself on Doctor Who online, so that's one
Oh, you
hobby.
ordered, okay,
Well, I mean, like I've mentioned it enough times where I feel like enough people know on the social medias that I like Doctor Who. But I
right.
think the other hobby, like I really enjoy, it's not a crazy hobby, but I like watercolor painting a lot. Um, I really like cooking now. Like, I mean, those aren't weird hobbies though. I'm trying to think if there's anything really goofy. But I don't know. I mean, folk dancing, I suppose maybe that's the one that you wouldn't expect. I like to go to these folk dances, in our town, like contra dancing it's called. So it's two lines and you face each other and you do all these old timey dance moves. It's kind of like square dancing, but it's not. And I do it from my wheelchair and I basically run people over like the whole night. And I'm really bad at right and left. And so there'll be there's a caller on stage who tells you what to do in real time, like into a microphone. He tells everybody where to go or whatever. And I'm constantly going the wrong direction and then realizing it. It's so fun though. I mean, have you ever done a contra dance?
I've done square dancing.
Okay.
I actually square dancing was actually really popular in my high school.
Okay.
But
Did you
no.
like it?
Oh yeah, yeah,
It's
definitely.
fun. You
Yeah,
can't be in a bad mood when you're doing
no,
something like that. It's
no,
like
not
because
at
your
all.
brain is like absorbed with like trying to go the right direction, and then it's very fun. I don't know why it's so fun, but it's a
Yeah,
very fun time.
and you will meet the nicest and most genuine people
Yes.
at square dancing.
Yep. And that's same with contra dancing. Everybody's just so sweet. Well, yes. Although sometimes there's these very traditional, like kind of uptight ones, but not the one I go to.
Yeah,
The one that I go to is very like everyone come and have a good time and it's fine. But if you're at one of the ones where they expect you to know what you're doing, they do not like it when you run them over and go the wrong direction. But that's not all the time. Most of the time, places are very friendly.
It seems like there's always some traditional uptight people anytime you get a group of people together with a common interest.
The hobbies, hobby, yeah, actually,
Yeah.
yep. You are
Um,
correct.
okay, so cooking, cooking and water painting. That's interesting. What do you like?
Watercolor, yep.
Yeah, what do you like to cook?
Um, I just like to cook like dinners. I mean, I'm not into baking really. I'm not super into following really hard recipes. I just like something about during the pandemic, especially at the beginning. My husband and I did this thing that I love and I wish it still existed, but there was a brief moment, like the first year of the pandemic where this one organization, the New Orleans Culinary and Hospitality Institute, NOCHI, it's NOCHI, NOCHI, they offered these cooking classes live on Zoom. So you
Hmm.
could join, and then there was a chef, but you could see everybody's little box, their kitchen, and like you could either cook with the chef in your own kitchen at home or just sit and watch. But my husband and I always cooked them. And the best part is we got my parents to do it. So they would be cooking in one little box of the Zoom, and
Oh,
then we would be cooking on the other end. And then after we did the cooking class, we would sign off of that Zoom and get on a different Zoom and eat together on
oh,
our
cool.
and it was just such a like weirdly cool thing. And that's when I got into cooking because I hadn't really done much with it, but I was like, there's got to be a way to connect with like my parents and do something fun because we were kind of all stuck inside. The other thing I tried is mead making, like honey wine mead.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
homemade winemaking.
yeah, so but like honey wine is very sweet, and I didn't know that you cannot cut corners when you gotta let it sit for as long as it needs to sit. And so I didn't one time, and I bottled it too early. So when we opened that bottle, it created a geyser that went on every single surface. I mean, this is in my whole
Oh,
apartment. Like we don't live in a very big place, and there was mead like behind our cupboards, on
oh,
our curtains. I mean, it's just a geyser spraying to the ceiling, which was bad. But
okay. So
um,
there's your crazy hobby right there.
yeah, it is. You're right. I guess I do have one.
All
Mead
right.
making.
Mead
Yes, good
making.
point.
Okay. So with that program coming out of New Orleans, did they perhaps teach you some Cajun cooking?
I think we did one or two Cajun meals, and I can't tell you what they are right now. I don't remember what they were, but we did a couple. But it was
Okay.
kind of like it started out mostly like pantry meals for people who were like stuck at home, and then it got a little more adventurous. We eventually dropped out when they started doing some really intense like lobster and stuff because we don't live down there, and it was like, where are we gonna get? So
Right.
they did clams one time, like clams in the shell. And I was like, can I use frozen clams? And they're like, they make frozen clams. And I
What?
was like, yeah, they do. So they're like, I guess so. So because we're in Minnesota and we just don't have access to like fresh seafood that way. We have fish, but not
Right.
like scallops and clams and lobsters and stuff.
Okay. Yeah, the pandemic did have a couple of silver linings, and one of them, aside from teaching people to use Zoom, Zoom became enormously popular. But
Yeah,
another one is a lot of people started cooking at home. My
yeah,
wife and I did the same thing. We
yeah,
when we, there was no option to go to a restaurant,
yeah.
we learned to make things on our own pretty well. But okay, that's very interesting. So. Um, on Twitter where I ran into you, you keep mentioning this person named Paul. Paul did this. Paul said that. Who is Paul?
uh, but Paul is my husband. We have been married for, I'm trying to think, almost 10 years, but we've been together for 17 years. So we dated a long time before we got married. He's gone right now because he does not like to be in interviews. So he like left to
Okay.
go on a walk or whatever. But he's a great human being. He's quieter than me, but he's really into like fishing and camping. We love to camp together. We camp a lot actually. That's one of our big joint hobbies. And then he is the one that got me into Doctor Who. So good job, Paul.
Okay. Okay, awesome. Yeah, good job,
Yeah,
Paul.
I
And
know.
that leads into this next question. Have you ever heard of Doctor Who?
Oh yes. So yes, it's so funny. Here's what happened. He loved it. He got into Doctor Who. Paul did like I don't know 2011, a long time ago, where he was watching them kind of on real time in Netflix. You know, like as they would or Hulu whenever they would come out. And he tried to get me to watch it. And for some reason, sometimes I'm like this. I'm obstinate for a while, and then later I'm like, oh, guess what I thought of? And it's the same thing that he'd been trying to get me to do for like 5 years or whatever. So he was like trying to watch the show with me, and I was like, no, I've got too much to do, too many. You know, I was in a bunch of bands at that point. I was in like 3 bands at once, so I was like, I don't have time for TV, so I didn't watch it. But then one day he was like I think right before the pandemic, so maybe like 2019, he was like, we were gonna watch something together, and he's like, assuming that I'm going to choose because I usually do. But I decided, oh, I'll be flexible. Whatever you want to watch, we'll watch whatever you want to watch. And it was Doctor Who. And I was like, I love this show. And he's like, oh, because he had already tried to get me into it. But it was so great because now what we do is once a weekend. So tomorrow night is our night this week. We make like a ravioli and garlic bread and green beans and have some red wine and chocolate. And then we watch like 4 Doctor Who episodes. Like that's our like date night is Doctor Who. And we've been
Awesome.
doing that for like, I don't know, before the pandemic, but definitely during the pandemic. And I think we've gotten through the whole series like twice now, not the old ones. Like I must say I'm a new Who person, although because it's been fun to kind of learn more about the old Who, I've been kind of dipping back into like we have BritBox so that I can go watch some. I don't know if I have the patience to watch all of the old ones, but it is fun to kind of dip back and like figure out what the reference is or whatever. So, anyways, yeah, it's been really fun and we love it. And yeah, it got us through the pandemic for sure. I mean, I looked forward to that weekend date night very much, and then they're just so great. I mean, like it's definitely my favorite show by a long shot. I mean, my dream is like, oh, I want to make music for Doctor Who. And you're my first Doctor Who based interview. So this is very exciting for me.
Okay, awesome.
Yes.
Well, okay, tell you what if they invited you to be on the show? Would you do it?
Yes. I mean, I'd be like Paul and I keep joking about that. I mean, that is the dream, actually.
Wow.
So, I mean, it's such a good show. It's like, there's so many layers of why it's good and it keeps changing. And it's like, I don't know, there's so many eras that I love. Like, I'm very excited that Donna's coming back. I know most people are, right?
Yeah. Oh, of
I
course.
hope.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. I mean, well, you know, you hear the few haters and you're like, how do you not love Donna Noble? And you're confused. But
Right.
I personally really like her. So I'm very excited about that and just the new era. And I don't know. And as I was telling you earlier, even the Flux, for all its foibles and its confusing narratives, I mean, I had to hand it to them for making something during the heat of the pandemic. Like, I think that's pretty cool. And as I said, I think they were lined up for 8 episodes and it went down to 6. So I just blame a lot of it on editing requirements.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think you're really onto something there, and I don't recall even considering that before, but I do seem to remember something about them saying that they had to cut out a couple of episodes or make the stretch of the specials shorter. And as I had told you earlier when we were speaking, I didn't understand Flux, but I still enjoyed it. And I'm wondering if there's something to that, to where part of the continuity had to be cut down to where maybe it would have made a lot more sense if there had been an additional couple of episodes.
Yeah, I tell myself that. I mean, I have no idea, but it does feel like they were rushing to get everything in, like, you know, cramming it in. And sometimes it felt like it jumped around. And I'd like to think that because I loved series 12, I wasn't as into series 11, but like the Timeless, I mean, that's a controversial point, but I think the Timeless Child is amazing and I love it so much. And I understand it's whatever, why anyone might be mad about it, but I thought it was great. And I'm pretty new to the series. Like, so I don't have like these diehard beliefs of like what Doctor Who is and isn't. And I just thought it was great. So, and like Ruth the reveal of her in the Jadoon one, I just was like, Fugitive of Jadoon. I was just like, I loved that show, and
Yeah.
I love The Master. I mean, so I think he can make good episodes. I didn't always like the writing of Chris Chibnall, like the dialogue, but I did think he made some really good episodes. So I can't imagine the Flux suddenly got bad. Like, I feel like that must
Right.
be editing.
Right.
I
Right.
don't know. I could
I
be
think
wrong.
I think you should interview Chris Chibnall.
I would love to. I mean, we got deep. Okay, in the middle of the pandemic, we started reading Lung Barrel, which is like, whoa, what's
Oh.
wrong with you? And so it was, which I loved it, but like that one old house they had in the Flips, that like the wooden house that kept getting destroyed and put back together. I was convinced that that was Lung Barrel and it was going to come out, and it never did. And I was like, oh, but I want to know. I just got to know if that was like a nod to Lung Barrel or not. I just got to know.
Well, you contact him. I doubt
Okay.
he would. I doubt he would tell you no. Now, what are your feelings on the change of music? I know that Murray Gold is coming back. I guess the British people pronounce it Murray. To me, it looks like it says Murray, but it seems like they call him Murray. So, Murray or Murray Gold is coming back, and then of course, during the Jodie Whittaker era, we had, I believe his name is pronounced Sigyn Akinola. How do you feel about how the music changed quite considerably?
You know, the fun thing about soundtrack music is a lot of times, like, and this happened with me in Macbeth, because like Macbeth was essentially a soundtrack. That's what I made for the live production, and it's like you notice it at its best moments, but a lot of times you're engrossed in the story and it's just supporting the story, so you don't even notice it. So I must admit, when I'm watching a show, unless I'm trying to pay attention to the music, there's a lot of times where I just don't. It just doesn't. I don't even notice it. I don't, which I know it sounds terrible because I'm a musician, but it's just supporting the action and you're in this other world. I will say that Sigyn, is that how you think? I think Sigyn, I think his take is more modern, and I guess that's probably less my style, but I still thought it was cool and interesting and very atmospheric. Especially, I mean, I just kind of want to know how he made it. Like, that's what I find interesting, is like, what tools do people use? Are they all live instruments? Is there synths involved? Like, do they, like, how many layers do they have? But I'd have to go and like sit there and actually listen to it, I think, for the music to really remember. There were times where it like pops up and you're like, oh, cool. Like Murray Gold was more, if I recall, like an orchestra vibe, right? Like
Yeah,
yeah,
big band, crashing cymbals, and all of that.
yeah.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
you notice that more, and in a way, I mean, that's probably more my style, I suppose. Like as a person who loves big band, and that's just kind of fun for me. But in a way, the subtlety is cool too. I mean, I would just like to talk to Sigyn about like why he went that other direction to the more
You
subtle
know, I would
modern age.
love, I would love to hear you talk to him about that because I'm extremely curious about that. Contacts again and tell him I would like to interview you, and tell him, and if you don't know who I am, Google me. I mean, I can't possibly see him telling you no. So I
I
would
mean, it
love
would
to
be
see that.
fun. It would be
Yeah.
fun. I mean,
Wow.
I got into Doctor Who a while ago, and just like, in that special, we've watched that Adventures of Time and Space or whatever that is, where they talk a little tiny bit about Delia Derbyshire, the person who arranged the very first theme song. And then I kind of went down a rabbit hole on Delia. That kind of stuff, like how people make the music, especially if it's atmospheric, is just so interesting. Like I mean, Delia Derbyshire, if anyone watching this has not done a deep dive on her, like that, she's amazing. Like that stuff is really cool to me. Like she would use sounds in the room and then distort them till they sounded like music, and then loop them and stuff, doing stuff that like I do now, but it's like on a computer and super easy. I'm not like splicing tapes
Yeah.
and like running them down the hallway and stuff. She was cool. So I just think it's a fun legacy. The show music for Doctor Who has always been. Actually, I went to my first Doctor Who convention this last year in January, and I kind of want to eventually try to lead a panel on the music of Doctor Who through the ages, but I don't know enough about it yet. Like, this is something I want to learn about, because I feel like it changed. Every era had its own, not just theme song, but like vibe for, and I think that's interesting. So you don't have a lot of shows with that much history that actually care about things like music. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That now that you put it that way, the very first second of Doctor Who that broadcast back in 1963 started with cutting edge music
Yeah.
from Delia Derbyshire from the
Yep.
Radiophonic Workshop. Wow.
Yep.
It started with music.
Yeah. I mean,
Wow.
it's a legacy, and it changed. All this. The theme songs keep changing. The thing you probably noticed this, but like when Jodie Whittaker was a weeping angel, that one moment in the show, the next episode I think started out without the heartbeat, like the music.
I didn't know that.
They took out the heartbeat because she
Really?
was stoned. Yeah, it's like fun stuff like that. Like it supports the show, and it's so subtle that maybe we wouldn't even notice it. But the more you learn about it, the cooler it is.
Oh, wow. I did not know that about the heartbeat. I'm gonna have to go check that out now. So,
Yeah, it's
oh,
fun.
okay. Okay. So I had asked you for an hour and we're pushing that. So I could talk to you about Doctor Who for about 8 or 12 hours if you're ever down for that.
I do have a little more time. My plan got delayed a little
Okay.
bit. And so
Okay.
if you have more questions, that's totally fine. It's
Okay.
up to
I
you.
actually have 1, 2, 3, 4 more questions and
Yeah.
very short ones. But if you do have a little bit more time, I'm wondering, do you have a lot of Doctor Who fans that were introduced to Doctor Who, their favorite doctor that they call my doctor, would be the one that they originally started watching, which in my case, that would be Tom Baker, because I started
Okay.
watching in the early 1980s and
Okay.
where Tom Baker was the fourth doctor. So if people were to ask me that, who's your doctor? I'd say, oh, well, it's Tom Baker. So with you, do you have a favorite doctor that you would consider to be your doctor?
We ask ourselves this question a lot because I think, I mean, Paul and I am saying,
Mhm.
I mean, I kind of watched it in like a mega binge cycle of like a year. I watched like every single new Who episode that year, like went through them really fast. I think it's always going to be between David Tennant and Matt Smith for me, but I can't choose like, I think my favorite series is like when Amy is pregnant with River Song, and like you just don't know what's happening, the doppelganger, all that stuff, and like everything comes full circle, and that big reveal. I really thought that season was cool. Like Lake Silencio, we have a Lake Silencio poster behind me. You can't
Oh,
probably
okay.
tell what that is, but like
Okay.
that series was so fun for me. But then like David Tennant and Donna Noble, like how can you not love those things? And then but
Right.
then Peter Capaldi, the first time around I didn't like him very much at all, which I want to interview him too actually, because he's a musician. The first time I was like, he's too mean to be the Doctor, and I was mad at him a lot. But then I watched it again and he has such depth of character, he's so good at it. And then Jodie, I think, like maybe got a little shortchanged with the writing, unfortunately. But I like her too, and I just can't choose, basically.
Right.
I mean, but I think really, if I had to choose, it would be probably Matt Smith, but David Tennant. Yeah, on a good day, David Tennant, but probably Matt Smith. What about you?
Okay.
Oh yeah, Tom Baker.
Yeah.
But what about for New Who? Do you have a New Who favorite?
Oh, Lord. I guess it would have to be Peter Capaldi.
Okay.
If I really had to, I really like all of them equally. Christopher Eccleston
He's good
is
too.
way up there because he was the Doctor when it came back, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of us that started watching in the 80s and then in 1989 it was gone, and we thought it was never going to come back.
Yeah.
We couldn't believe it was back. So I have to uh, raise a glass to Mr. Eccleston for bringing it back and being such an excellent doctor. But yeah, maybe a little bit Peter Capaldi. I think you need to interview Peter Capaldi also.
I know. I have so many interviews to do.
Right. Okay. Now you mentioned the poster behind you. I see something else behind you there, which I saw you
Oh,
place earlier. That's the picture of the TARDIS, and that
yes.
is the second time I've seen that picture, because you tweeted a photograph of that on your nightstand in New York City, didn't you?
Yeah, I brought
Yeah.
it with. I like to bring a couple little tiny things from home because we were there for a whole month, so it's kind of nice to have a little like homey place. So I bring like a little lantern with me that plays music, and then that little TARDIS came with us too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mine here is this is actually a sponge.
Oh, cool.
It's a toy. It's squeezable.
Oh, one of
So
those. Okay, that's
yeah.
cool.
So okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, listen. I guess you're excited about the new era with Shooty Gatwa coming up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
I'm nervous. I mean, I'm mostly just excited, but it's like it's been so long. I feel like I've been waiting and waiting and waiting. So I'm just kind of nervous and excited to see how it unfolds.
Okay. Okay. So let's go ahead and wrap this up. And what I'm wondering is, to anyone young or old that will refer to this interview in the future, somebody looking to you for inspiration, someone with dreams or goals of achieving the things that you have, would you have any best advice to give them?
Yeah. I guess I would just say to keep doing what you love to do, kind of regardless of whether you feel like it's being accepted the way you want it to be in society. Like what I'm trying to say is, there was a while where with Alan Sparhawk, I would play, we play bar shows, and there's a lot of talking, and it doesn't really sound like anyone's paying any attention, and you're giving the show, and you're just like, what's going on? At least not like what you imagined as a young person being a performer would feel like. And he said, you can't hear the people who are listening. There's always going to be people when you're performing who are getting what you're putting out, and they just might not be the most obvious person in the room. So just assume that you're there it's like you're there to serve the audience, whether or not you can tell the impact in the moment or not. Like somebody will connect with it if you take it seriously that way. So I try to take myself out of the equation when I'm performing and just send it out to the audience for someone who needs it, And I think the more that you practice, like I think the more that you put yourself out there and the more that you do and try, eventually, you get different opportunities. Like I'm doing these theater things now that I never would have imagined, but I played for 10 years in Minnesota before I did the Tiny Desk. And then after the Tiny Desk, I played 500 shows all over the country. Like I did a lot of stuff, and it leads to the next step. So like, don't despair and try to rush the process is what I'm saying. Like there's very few things that go from like 0 to 100 or like an overnight success. It's not about the outward success. It's about connecting with the people that you're creating for, and then about just like learning and doing and getting better at it, and then it makes it more fun. So I try not to make big plans. Like I am releasing, I'm very excited about this, like next year, or in the next year, I should say, in the next 12 months, I'm going to release a soundtrack of that Macbeth that I did, because I own the music to it. So I get to release it, but I don't have expectations for it. Because I think as soon as you hang an expectation on art, it never turns out exactly what you think. And so it's better to just live in the moment and enjoy. The grass is always greener unless you focus on the present moment. You know what I mean? So
Yep. Gotcha.
Yep. Don't give up.
Okay, perfect. So do you happen to have a favorite charity?
Oh, yeah, I forgot that you sent that question. I mean, we have one we do a lot with Second Harvest Food Bank in Duluth, in like northern Minnesota. They service a lot of people who have food scarcity, and so I guess I would say off the very top of my head. And then I mean, there's a lot of disability ones. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't prepare better for this question.
I'm
I
sorry,
guess
I didn't prepare better for it either. I should have asked you a disability question, but I actually didn't know if you wanted to talk,
no,
you
that's
know.
fine. I'm trying. Like, I think maybe okay. So I would say Second Harvest Food Bank, or for like disability, the National Disability. Wait, what's the one that it's called? It's called DREDF, DREDF, Disability Rights Education Defense Fund. That one does a lot of advocacy, especially like not just government advocacy, but like making sure disability issues are being taken care of. That really, like healthcare advocacy and stuff. So I guess
Okay.
those two. There's a lot, but yeah, those are probably the two that I work with the most, support
Okay.
the most.
Okay, and then for people watching this on YouTube, we're going to put a couple of links to those right here below.
Oh,
and I
and
would
then of
urge
course,
people. Yep, go ahead.
sorry to cut you off. Duh. I mean, I also co-found. I didn't even talk about this. How time went very fast, but
It did.
during the pandemic, I co-founded an organization called RAMPed, Recording Artists and Music Professionals with Disabilities, rampd.org, and we're working to advocate for accessibility in the industry, more inclusion in the music industry, and then also just kind of amplifying disability culture. And one of the things that they're going to be doing is taking on newer, like artists that are professional, but kind of at the earlier stages of the career, and helping them develop professionally in ways that they might not have access to in a culture that doesn't really celebrate disability and maybe hasn't recognized disability culture as much. So that's another place to just check out. I mean, it's not a charity as much as it is like it's a nonprofit that works to amplify disability culture. It's not like maybe the same as a food bank, but it's very, very cool. And I guess I would love to have that link in there too, rampd.org.
Ramped.org. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Yep. We're going to put that down there too. So
Awesome.
I ran into you on Twitter and I thought, I would love to interview her. And you said
Yay.
yes. And that's awesome. You made my day. So where do you like to be found online?
Oh, well, I have a website at violinscratches.com.
Yep.
I have a Patreon page, which I've been sending like samples from the memoir as I write them and stuff, and that's been really fun. So it's patreon.com/Gaelynn Lea. Otherwise, I'm on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and YouTube, all at Gaelynn Lea. So those are all the same handle.
Okay, perfect. I'll tell you what, it's a real honor to be able to speak with you, and I thank you. Was there anything that I did not ask you today that you wish I would have?
No, I mean, I could have also talked about Doctor Who a lot more.
Yeah.
But I understand this is a dual nature interview. No, I think I'm excited for the future of the show, and I'm excited that you are my very, very first Doctor Who based interview. So
Awesome.
Hopefully not the last. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, my pleasure, and thank you very much for your time. And please contact, what was it? Chris Chibnall, Peter Capaldi, and Segun Akinola.
Yes.
Yeah. How do you pronounce that? Is it Segun?
Segun maybe is how I say it in my head, but
right.
I haven't heard it said out loud. So we should research that.
Yeah, definitely.
I'll figure that out before I email him. So yes.
Right.
Well,
okay.
thank you.
Yeah. So interview those three, and I would love to see that. So, Miss Lea, thank you very much. You're very kind. It's an honor. I love your music, and I really appreciate your time. And everyone who has enjoyed this or learned from it, please thank Miss Lea for her time. Check out the links below. Check out her music. Check out her works. Look for her upcoming book. Look for her upcoming album. And you're more than likely going to find something that you will love.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. Peace out from San Francisco.
Bye.
Bye.